Well, the Independent Commission for Aid Impact is the independent body that's responsible for the scrutiny of UK aid. Our scrutiny focuses on maximising the impact and effectiveness of the UK aid budget for beneficiaries, and also on developing value for money and delivering value for money for the UK taxpayer. ICAI reports to Parliament, not to ministers. It's independent of government. We report to a subcommittee of the International Development Committee of the House of Commons, and this ensures both independence and accountability as far as our activities are concerned. The International Development Committee is the House of Commons select committee that provides oversight of government's aid policy. So there's a clear difference between their and our responsibilities, as policy questions are outside of our remit. We work together, ourselves and the select committee, in a mutually productive relationship for the benefit of the world's poor and for the benefit of the UK taxpayer. In its report on our work in 2014, the committee described the relationship between itself and ICAI as being similar to that between the Public Accounts Committee and the National Audit Office. So I think that contextualises it for you. And I would like to thank the former members of the International Development Committee for the constructive way in which we've been able to work together. Well, the primary objective of ICAI is to develop and publish transparent, impartial and objective reports which balance value for money with delivery and impact on the ground and the voice of intended beneficiaries. Over the past 4 years, we have, as Edward said, undertaken 45 reviews, and these have examined a very full spectrum of the UK government's international development work in order to help to create a more complete picture of the UK's aid programme and guided by our report selection criteria of coverage, materiality, interest and risk. The UK government has made an unprecedented commitment to tackling global poverty. In our 4 years of operation, the UK aid programme has grown from £8.6 billion in 2011 to £11.8 billion in 2014. And by enshrining the 0.7% of GNI target into law, the International Development (Official Development Assistance Target) Act of 2015 ensures that the UK will remain a leading provider of development assistance for the coming years. The environment in which it will provide that assistance, however, is increasingly complex. Many developing countries are crossing the threshold from low to middle income status. And for those countries, government revenues, including from natural resources, and private finance, much of it coming from countries such as China and the other new economic powers, are more important sources of development finance than is aid. And while those countries still face major development challenges, in future they'll be looking to the UK more for policy solutions and for technical knowledge than they will be for finance. Other developing countries, however, developing countries which are affected by conflict and by political instability, they remain heavily dependent on aid. Their development is regularly set back by crises, both natural crises and man-made crises, and they give rise to complex humanitarian and development needs. So for DFID, therefore, the coming years will call for considerable agility as the department adapts to a changing world and to a dynamic development agenda. And one key challenge will be building its capacity in economic development. The Secretary of State has made a major commitment in this area, pledging to spend some £1.8 billion by the end of 2015-16. Well, as DFID's strategy points out, no country can defeat poverty without private sector-led growth to create jobs and to create livelihood opportunities for the poor. And I might also add a personal comment, to create more self-respect for the members of the population of those countries. But we would stress, however, that this emphasis on economic development should not come at the expense of basic services like health and education, which remain foundational for development. Without educated and healthy workers, there is little chance of sustainable economic development for any country. Our reviews of DFID's economic development portfolio and of its approach to partnering with business suggest that DFID needs to improve both its approach and its capacity. We found that DFID's strategy, though ambitious, is not based on a clear view of its comparative advantage, and that it lacks focus, particularly in fragile states. Excuse me. DFID is struggling to translate high-level objectives into coherent portfolios at the country level. It needs to join up its work at the micro, such as microfinance, the mid, for example, making markets work for the poor, and macro levels, such as regulatory reform, so as those things are mutually reinforcing. And this lack of guidance is compounded by a shortage of practical experience amongst DFID's staff. While DFID has doubled its cadre of private sector advisors in recent years, the profile does remain very junior. Well, DFID is increasingly financing economic development through loans, equities and guarantees. And while some of its investments are effective, the portfolio as a whole lacks strategic oversight and is not clearly poverty focused. We would like to see it concentrate more clearly on scaling up small businesses so as to create jobs and livelihoods, as well as catalysing other investment flows, particularly flows from abroad. DFID is committed to spending some 30% of its aid budget in countries that are affected by conflict and fragility. And this means that DFID has become, to a significant extent, a specialist in fragile states. So we carried out a review of the scaling up of DFID's support to fragile states, and this review highlighted that DFID can be unrealistic in its ambitions and timeframes and over-complex in its delivery methods. In difficult environments, it needs to balance relatively simple interventions that can deliver immediate returns, things such as building local infrastructure, with programming that's designed to promote long-term pathways out of fragility. Our review of DFID's support to Afghanistan, for example, found that programs with straightforward objectives and shorter delivery chains consistently outperformed the more complex programs. Well, Chairman, overall, we've been impressed by DFID's humanitarian portfolio. DFID played a leading role in the response to the 2011 humanitarian crisis in the Horn of Africa, where they achieved good impact and good value for money. We gave DFID's response to Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines one of our that's 3 out of those 45, overall green ratings. And we gave it that rating for the speed and for the flexibility of its response. There have been some useful changes in the way in which DFID funds humanitarian operations, which have helped to improve its preparedness. But DFID is weaker, however, we found, at responding to long-term or chronic emergencies, where humanitarian and development assistance are needed in parallel. Bridging the traditional gulf between the humanitarian and development sides of DFID is one of the key challenges for the future. Across our reports, we've explored the elements that contribute to achieving lasting, transformative change in the lives of poor people. We believe that DFID should not just achieve a good return on its aid investments, it should also be aiming for meaningful results that make appreciable inroads into the development challenges. In our report on DFID's approach to delivering impact, a copy of which is on your chairs, we listed a series of factors that have emerged from our reviews as being important for achieving this. Well, we're often asked, so what should DFID do differently? DFID is constantly reforming its own structures and business processes to meet the challenges of an evolving aid programme in a complex world. We've been positive about a number of recent changes, including the introduction of DFID's smart rules, and they've lightened the administrative burden while clarifying lines of accountability. We were also impressed by the introduction of the country poverty reduction diagnostic, which is promoting a multidisciplinary approach to understanding the constraints on poverty reduction in each partner country. We believe that there needs to be a robust risk appetite coupled with strong risk management. According to both its own senior management and its peer agencies, DFID does indeed have a robust appetite for risk in its programming choices. And we fully agree that a willingness to take risks is essential in order to achieve transformative impact. Maximising development impact means striking the right balance between tried and tested interventions delivered at scale with more speculative interventions that offer the prospects of catalytic results. Getting that balance right, however, is a significant management challenge, particularly in fragile states, and it calls for sophisticated risk management. DFID itself has recognised that its risk management is not yet up to scratch. It lacks tools to ensure a good balance of risk and return within its country portfolios. Country offices often seem to be uncertain as to what level of risk is acceptable to senior management, and staff incentives are not always consistent with the department's stated philosophy. To help to align incentives, we've encouraged DFID to ensure that high-risk programmes are clearly recognised as such and subject to additional management arrangements with particular attention to flexibility and to lesson learning. To encourage transformative change, development programmes need to combine direct benefits for the poor with promoting the policies and institutions that are needed in order to sustain and scale up these benefits. This means working strategically with governments, communities and the private sector in order to influence ideas and to develop capacities. When working in complex areas, sustainable impact needs to be planned over an extended period of time, often through several phases of programme. The earlier phases serve to put in place the building blocks for later transformation. And we saw this long-term approach at work, for example, in DFID's education programming in the Punjab in Pakistan, where DFID has made a sustained effort to put in place the political commitments, the policies, and the institutions which are required for complex reforms. And while the pace of change deriving from that is relatively slow, this strategic approach really does offer the potential for transformative impact. Too often, on the other hand, however, we have found that the short programme cycle of 3 to 5 years works against a long-term approach to impact. DFID staff and implementers often feel that they're under pressure to focus on short-term results at the expense of long-term strategic impact. As we've said, transformational impact is often the product of multiple reinforcing interventions. DFID's planning and results management systems work mainly, however, at the individual programming level and are not well suited to capturing results across a portfolio. In the coming period, many of DFID's priorities, such as promoting economic development, ending violence against women, need to be approached through suites of linked interventions, working in partnership with others. And DFID therefore needs to pay more attention to the design of coherent portfolios that maximise overall results. DFID should pay particular attention to building on the work of other players and to creating effective coalitions. A particular issue in our recent reviews has been the question of coherence between central and country level led programmes. Some central programmes are small initiatives focused on things such as learning and innovation. Others are designed to deliver results at real scale. And in both cases, we found that there's often a disconnect between DFID's country programmes on the one hand and the activities of central programmes operating in the same country on the other. This calls not just for better coordination, but also for a rethinking of how central and country programming fit together. We've also pointed out a lack of coherence in DFID's engagement with the multilateral system, in that DFID's influencing objectives at the global level are not clearly enough articulated and not carried through into engagement strategies at country level with individual agencies. We've seen that DFID invests a lot of resources into the generation of evidence, including challenge funds to promote innovation, pilot projects, evaluations and sponsored research. And much of this work is high quality and does contribute to the global pool of knowledge on development. What's less clear, however, is how this investment in evidence is translated into learning in action, so as to inform better programming in practice. In our review of how DFID learns, we noted that DFID staff learn well as individuals, but that much knowledge is lost across the organisation as a whole. DFID lacks mechanisms to capture experience from individual programmes, be that positive or be that negative, and to apply it globally. We're also concerned that its evaluations are not timed to fit the programming cycle, so that information on results is rarely available in time to inform the next phase of programming. We encourage DFID to take a more active approach to learning. This does not necessarily mean investing more in studies and analysis. Indeed, we concur with the observation of the DAC peer review that DFID may already be producing more than it can consume. Rather, it means integrating learning more systematically into the programme cycle. We have recommended that DFID build structured learning into its programmes, trying out interventions in different combinations and capturing the lessons in real time, allowing for constant learning and adjustment. We also suggest that DFID think of its evaluations and reviews less as products and more as prompts to continuous evaluative thinking. Our reports how DFID works with multilateral agencies to achieve impact and DFID's approach to delivering impact consider these important issues in greater depth.